Welcome to Lukebook Money, Built for Singapore. Today, a housewife who never earned a single salary and quietly saved $500,000. Here's the real story. Quick favor before we start. If you're new to Tiger Brokers, just tap the link in my description below or key in the code on your screen when you sign up. We both earn $90 and it quietly keeps these daily videos free. Thank you. Now, let's get into it. This is a story about a mother who never earned a single cent, and a stuck drawer her daughter opened 3 weeks after the funeral. For 35 years, Madam Goh was just a housewife. Or so everyone believed. Around $500,000. Built quietly, over 3.5 decades, by a woman the world had written down as earning absolutely nothing. One honest word first. Madam Goh is a character, built from a real and common Singapore pattern. The figures are rounded and illustrative, and none of this is financial advice. This one is a little different from our usual stories. It is not about a big earner. It is about a person who never earned at all, and who may have been the real financial mind in the family. It begins with her daughter, May, and the task nobody ever wants. Clearing out a parent's home after they are gone. May was 42. An accountant, with her own family and her own mortgage. She had loved her mother deeply. And, if she was honest with herself, she had also quietly pitied her. Because Ma had never worked a paying job. While May chased promotions, her mother had stayed home, cooking and cleaning and raising 3 children. Just a housewife. Her younger brother, Wei, felt the same. They both assumed their mother's life had been small, and that she had leaned on their late father for every dollar. The funeral had been small and simple, exactly the way she would have wanted it. No fuss, no waste, even at the very end. The family thought that was just her being humble. So when the family gathered to sort out her affairs, nobody expected much. A little cash, perhaps. Some old jewelry. That was all a housewife could leave behind. Surely. Their father had passed a few years earlier. He had been the earner, the one with the pay slip. Ma, they thought, had simply kept house. The money story was his, not hers. The flat was small and spotless, the way she always kept it. May started with the old wooden bureau in the bedroom, the one with the drawer that had always stuck. She worked it open, expecting expired coupons. Instead she found bank books. Not one. A neat stack of them, bound with a rubber band, every line filled in by hand. Some of the passbooks were decades old, the ink faded, the earliest entries written in a young woman's careful hand. She had been doing this since before May was even born. May opened the top one. The balance did not make sense. She opened the second, then the third. Her hands slowly went cold. Under the bank books was more. Much more than a housewife was ever supposed to have. May unfolded one of the Singapore Savings Bond statements. Then a dividend slip from one of the local banks. Real income, in her mother's name, that nobody in the family had ever known about. As May kept looking, the drawer gave up more and more. This was not the forgotten cash of a housewife. It was a quiet, deliberate portfolio. The share records were in her mother's name. Goh Swee Lian. Not her husband's. Hers. She had owned these companies herself, for decades, and never breathed a word. May called Wei to come over. When he arrived and saw the papers spread across the bed, he stood in the doorway and said, "This cannot be Moss." But it was. Every last page of it. Then May picked up the notebook. She had seen it her whole childhood but never once opened it. Inside were the household accounts, every dollar in and out, for 35 years. May audited real companies for a living. And she was looking at the most disciplined set of books she had ever seen, kept by a woman with no training and no salary. The entries were tiny and exact. Fish, $1.80. School shoes, mended. And a column, every single month, marked simply savings. It was always filled in first. May sat down on the edge of her mother's bed and did the only thing an accountant knows to do with grief. She started to add it all up. The everyday bank accounts alone, spread across those books, held more than May kept in her own. And that turned out to be the smallest of the 4 piles. She sorted the papers into piles, the way her mother had always sorted coins. Shares here. Bonds there. CPF statements. Cash books. Slowly, a hidden life in numbers took shape in front of her. When she finally reached the bottom line, the number was close to $500,000. May read it 3 times before she believed it. Then she set the notebook down, and she cried. Not from grief alone. From understanding, all at once, how badly she had misjudged her own mother. Wei, who had always pictured himself as the one who would one day take care of their mother, had to sit with a harder truth. She had been quietly taking care of all of them, the entire time. On the phone to her brother that night, May kept coming back to one thing. All those years, they thought she had nothing. She had simply never let it show. And a sharper thought followed. Her mother had not merely saved this. She had run the whole household on one modest income, and still put money away, every month, for 35 years. In the same drawer sat her mother's only piece of gold, a thin wedding band. She had never upgraded it, never bought herself another. The jewelry was tiny. The bank books were not. How does a woman with no income build $500,000? To understand the money, May first had to understand her mother. And she realized she had never truly seen her at all. So who was Madame Go, really? Not the saver, not the investor. The person. Because the money is not the point of this story. She is. She was born in 1950, into a big and poor family. As the eldest daughter, she left school early to help raise her younger brothers and sisters. She learned to run a household before she was even a teenager. Counting coins, stretching rice, making sure everyone was fed. It was the only school of finance she ever attended. She married at 23 and moved into a small rented flat with a single quiet goal. Her own children would never know the hunger and the fear she had grown up with. For a few years in her early 20s, she worked. A seamstress in a small factory, long hours, low pay. It was the only time in her life she ever drew a wage. Then she married, and stopped. But those few working years mattered more than they sound. They left a small seed in her CPF account, one that would quietly grow for the next 40 years. Her husband, May's father, was a technician. A steady, decent man who earned a steady, decent wage. Never rich. In today's money, perhaps $3,000 to $4,000 a month. And on that single income, they raised 3 children in a small flat, and still built $500,000. That is the puzzle we are here to solve. Their arrangement was simple, and for their generation, common. He earned the money and handed it to her. She managed all of it. He trusted her completely, and she never let him down. When a neighbor bought a shiny new car, the whole block came to admire it. More admired it too. Then she went home and bought a little more of the bank that had lent them the money for it. Her husband never questioned a cent of it. He watched the flat get paid off, the children stay in school, food always on the table, and knew he had married the safest pair of hands he would ever find. To really see what she did, follow her through a single ordinary day. Because the saving did not come from nowhere. It came from this. Now picture one of her ordinary days. Her work had no start time, no end time, no pay slip, and no applause. She went to the wet market at dawn, when the vegetables were freshest and the aunties were ready to deal. She knew every stall and every fair price, and she bargained for every cent. Not out of meanness. Out of respect. Every cent she saved at the market was a cent that could go to work for the family's future. She simply refused to overpay for anything. She cooked every meal. Breakfast, Lunch packed into tins, dinner on the table at 7. Eating out was a rare treat, never a habit. She must have cooked 40,000 meals in her life. And the children never felt poor. There was always enough. Birthdays had a cake, festivals had new clothes, school trips were paid. She simply made every dollar do the work of two. She mended clothes instead of replacing them. A torn uniform was sewn at night, not thrown away. May still remembers the hum of the sewing machine after the children were in bed. Nothing left the house that could still be used. Glass jars became storage. Old shirts became cleaning racks. The back of a bill became a shopping list. Waste, to her, was almost physically painful. But she was never mean to the people she loved. When a grandchild wanted an ice cream, she paid, without a word. Careful with herself, and soft with everyone else. Here is what the world saw, and what was really happening underneath it. Economists have a name for what she did. Unpaid household labor. If you hide out everything a homemaker does, the cook, the cleaner, the tutor, the nurse, the manager, it would cost a fortune every year. Studies that try to put a wage on a full-time homemaker's work often land near a real professional salary. Madame Go earned that, every year, and was paid nothing for it. But she did something rarer than the work itself. She took the money her frugality saved, and instead of letting it melt back into daily life, she captured it, and sent it out to work again. That is the leap most households never make. Being frugal saves money. But saved money that just sits, or gets spent later, never grows. Ma was frugal and an investor. That is the whole secret. And do not picture a joyless woman. She laughed loudly, adored her grandchildren, kept a pot of tea always warm for visitors. She was careful with things, and generous with people. And she read the business pages of the newspaper, every day, over her morning tea. She could not have defined a price-to-earnings ratio, but she knew which companies paid, and which ones lasted. That was her edge. Not cleverness, not luck, not a big income. Just attention, patience, and a refusal to waste. Ordinary traits, applied for 35 years without a single break. Everyone underestimated her, including the daughter who loved her most. So let us do what nobody did while she was alive. Let us study exactly how she did it. How do you save $500,000 when you never earn one? Madame Go had a system. She never called it that, but it was as clear as any business plan. It had 5 parts. Habit 1, and the most important of all. She paid the family first, before a single cent was spent. On payday, her husband handed her the income, and the plan began instantly. Before groceries, before bills, before anything, she took a fixed slice off the top and moved it straight into savings. She saved first, and then the family lived on what was left. This sounds like a small thing. It is everything. Most people spend first and try to save whatever survives at the end of the month. Which is usually nothing, because the money is already gone. She simply reversed the order. The slice was not huge. On a modest income with 3 children, perhaps 15 to 20%. But it was sacred. It came out the day the money arrived, and it was never touched. Today we would call this paying yourself first, or automating your savings. She had no app and no standing order. She had a discipline stronger than any software ever written. And notice what saving first really does. It turns your savings into a bill you pay to your own future, as fixed as the rent. Everything else must fit around it. That one reversal can change a whole life. Habit 2. She ran the household like a business, and that notebook was her ledger. Every dollar in, every dollar out, balanced at the end of each month. She always knew exactly where the family stood. Because she tracked everything, nothing leaked. No mystery expenses, no forgotten subscriptions, no money that simply vanished. The most powerful budgeting tool is not an app. It is attention. She had a rule for spending, too. Before any purchase that was not food or a bill, she waited. If she still wanted it a week later, and truly needed it, she bought it. Usually, the wanting had simply passed. She separated needs from wants with a clear eye. The children's education was a need, and she never cut it. A new sofa, while the old one still worked, was a want, and it could wait. And she never let the family's spending rise just because it could. In better years and leaner ones, the household ran the same. The savings slice stayed. Their lifestyle never inflated. This is exactly what a good chief financial officer does. Allocate the income on purpose, defend the savings, and refuse to let costs creep. She did it for a family, but the skill is identical. So the money came in, and the family lived on less than it earned. But that is only half the story. The next habit hid in plain sight, on every ordinary day. Habit 3. She stretched every dollar until it squeaked. And each small saving was not the end of the road for that dollar. It was the beginning. Cooking at home instead of eating out saved the family a few $100s a month. That alone, saved and invested over 35 years, could grow into a six-figure sum. Let us put a real number on it. Save around $400 a month, and invest it at a long run 6%. Over 35 years, that one habit alone grows to well over $400,000. That is the astonishing part. A few $100s a month, roughly the cost of eating in instead of out, is not a small habit. Given enough decades, it is a fortune wearing a disguise. She wasted nothing. Leftovers became lunch. Vegetable ends became soup. Each act saved only a few cents, but she performed thousands of them a year, year after year. People misunderstand this part. They think small savings are pointless. But small savings, repeated daily and then invested, are exactly how ordinary people build extraordinary sums. Consistency beats size. Because here is what she understood that most savers miss. A dollar saved is not just a dollar. Invested for 30 years, it can become 5 or 10. She was not saving cents. She was planting them. There was another reason she refused to let cash sit idle. Prices rise. A dollar left in a drawer slowly loses its power. What cost $1 in her youth costs several today. Cash quietly shrinks. Investing was how she fought back. Her shares and her CPF grew faster than prices rose, so her money gained buying power over time instead of losing it. Standing still, she understood, is really moving backwards. Habit 4. She saved every windfall, without a single exception. This was her secret weapon, and it is the one almost everybody wastes. Think of all the money that arrives outside a normal paycheck. When a bonus came, the family upgraded nothing. It went straight into the savings pile. When Ong Pao arrived, some was saved for the children, and more quietly saved her own share too. Windfalls feel like free money, so most of us treat them as permission to splurge. But a dollar from a bonus grows exactly as well as a dollar from a wage. A windfall saved is a windfall multiplied. Over a lifetime, those captured windfalls stack up to a startling amount. Decades of bonuses and Ong Pao, invested instead of spent, became one of the largest bricks in her $500,000. Now the habit that turned a saver into a wealth builder. Because saved money that only sits still slowly dies, eaten by rising prices. More knew this, so she made every dollar work. Habit 5. She invested. Not in anything clever or risky. She bought a small number of solid, boring Singapore companies, the kind that had paid dividends for as long as anyone could remember. The local banks. A telecoms company. A firm that runs the ports. A property trust that owns shopping malls. Businesses the whole country use every day. She had a simple rule for what she would buy. Only businesses the whole country use every day, and could not easily live without. Own those, she felt, and you own a piece of Singapore itself. There is a quiet genius in that choice. She was buying the companies that profited from everyone else's spending. When the neighbors shopped at the mall or paid a phone bill, a few cents flowed to owners like her. These blue-chip companies have often paid dividends of around 4 to 6% a year. And over the long run, the share prices themselves tended to climb. Income plus growth together. And the dividends did not just arrive. They grew. Good companies tend to raise their payouts over the years, so the income from the very same shares rose, decade after decade. A pay rise she never had to ask for. She also never put everything into one company. She owned several, across different industries. If one had a bad year, the others carried on. She never said diversification. She just refused to risk it all on one bet. And every dividend that arrived, she reinvested. She never spent the income from her shares. She used it to buy more shares, which paid more dividends, which bought even more. This is the quiet miracle of compounding. Your money earns money. Then that new money earns money too. Slow at first, and then, given enough time, almost unbelievable. Watch what reinvested dividends do over a lifetime. In the early years the line barely lifts off the ground. But it bends, and near the end, it climbs steeply. The hardest part is living through that flat stretch on the left, where nothing seems to happen for years. Most people give up there. Mo never even looked. She just kept feeding it. The biggest lever in all of this was not the amount she saved. It was time. She started young and never stopped, so compounding had its full run. A smaller sum, started earlier, beats a larger one started late. And she bought steadily, in good years and bad, without ever trying to guess the perfect moment. Some months she paid more, some months less, and it all averaged out. Regular buying beat clever timing, every time. She did not put everything into shares. She also bought Singapore savings bonds, in her own name. Safe, backed by the government, and easy to redeem if the family ever truly needed the cash. She bought a little more each year, building a ladder of bonds. This was her ballast. The steady, boring, sleep-at-night money that would never crash, no matter what the market did. See how she balanced the two sides. That balance was why she could hold her shares through every crash. She never had to sell in a panic, because the safe money covered any emergency. The bonds quietly protected the shares. That safe pile did one more quiet job. It was the family's emergency fund. When the fridge died or a medical bill came, she never reached for a loan or sold a share. She used the cushion, then rebuilt it. And here is the detail that stopped me cold. Everything was in her mother's own name. The shares, the bonds, the accounts. A woman with no salary had built her own independent wealth. That mattered more than the money. It meant Mo was never truly dependent, never powerless. If life had turned hard, she had her own foundation to stand on. Quiet financial dignity, built by her own hand. There was one more pillar, and it is the one nobody expects a housewife to have. Her own CPF, the National Retirement Savings, grown in two clever ways. Remember those few years she worked as a young seamstress? Each month, part of her wage went into her CPF, as it does for every worker here. When she stopped working, that money did not stop growing. Savings in a CPF account earn a steady return, guaranteed by the government. The retirement portion earns around 4% a year. That small seed from her 20s compounded quietly for 40 years. A government-backed floor rate that has held steady for decades may not sound exciting next to the stock market. But it does not panic when markets do, and over 40 years it quietly turns a small sum into a large one. Boring, here, is a feature. But here is the beautiful part. Her husband topped up her CPF account. Under a scheme called the Retirement Sum Topping Up Scheme, one person can add money to a family member's retirement savings. Every year he could spare it, he moved some money into her account. It grew at that steady 4%, completely safe from any market storm, building her retirement even though she earned nothing. There was a reward for him, too. In many years, topping up a spouse's retirement account can lower the income tax the working partner pays. The family saved on tax and built her nest egg at once. Over 35 years, her early savings, plus his steady top-ups, plus 4% compounding, grew her CPF into a six-figure sum. A retirement fund, for a woman who never drew a retirement salary. And at retirement age, that CPF turned into a monthly payout for life, through CPF Life, the national annuity. An income arriving every month, until the very end, that she never worked a single day to receive. Add it up, and more had built three engines. Shares for growth. Bonds and cash for safety. And CPF for a guaranteed income in old age. Each one covered a different risk. Together, they were hard to shake. 5 habits built the wealth. But just as important was a short list of things Madame Go never, ever did. The mistakes she quietly avoided were half the secret. She never borrowed for things that lose value. The only loan she ever allowed was the flat, and she cleared even that years early. Owing money, she said, is working for someone else. She never chased a hot tip. A relative once pushed a can't-lose scheme that promised to double her money in a year. She smiled, said no thank you, and kept buying her boring banks. She never tried to keep up with the neighbors. When they renovated, upgraded, or flew off on holiday, she felt no pull to match them. Their spending was their business. Her savings were hers. This one is subtle, but it was central. Every dollar she did not spend trying to look wealthy was a dollar she could use to actually become wealthy. She skipped the costume, and kept the substance. And she never panic sold. When markets crashed and the news was frightening, she did nothing. She had lived through enough storms to know that good companies recover, if you simply refuse to sell them. The family remembers the crash of 2008. Her shares had halved on paper. Wei, then a young man, asked if she was worried. She poured him tea and told him a paper drop is not a loss. Within a few years, those same shares had climbed to new highs. Everyone who sold in fear locked in their losses. She held, and came out far ahead. The crash was never the enemy. The panic was. So there it is. Pay the family first. Run it like a business. Stretch every dollar. Save every windfall. Put it all to work. And avoid the big mistakes. None of it clever. All of it kept, for 35 years. Strip it all down, and the engine is one simple gap. She spent less than the family took in, every month, and invested the difference. Everything else, the shares, the bonds, the CPF, was just where that gap went. So let us go back to May, on the edge of her mother's bed, and add it all up properly. For sources of wealth, built with zero salary. Watch how ordinary pieces make an extraordinary total. The first and largest piece was the shares. Decades of small, regular purchases of solid Singapore companies, with every dividend reinvested along the way. Held for 30 years and more, compounding the whole time, her share portfolio had grown to around $230,000. The single biggest brick in the wall. Remember, she never earned a wage. Every one of those dollars came from money she saved out of running the household, then multiplied by patience and reinvested dividends over decades. The second piece was her CPF. The seed from her seamstress years, her husband's decades of top-ups, and steady 4% compounding, all working quietly in the background. Her CPF had grown to around $160,000. A full retirement fund, in the name of a woman the world had labeled unemployed. The third piece was her Singapore savings bonds and her cash. The safe money. The part that would never crash, and was always there if the family needed it. That safe pile came to around $110,000. It earned less than the shares, but it let her sleep at night, and it meant she never had to sell in a panic. And woven through it all were the everyday bank accounts, the float she kept so the household never ran dry. Small, but real, and folded into the total. And here is a detail May, the accountant, especially admired. The pieces protected each other. The safe money meant the shares were never sold in fear. Low cost meant more went in. Each part made the others stronger. So May laid the pieces out on the bed, the way her mother would have. Shares. CPF. Savings bonds and cash. And the everyday accounts. For ordinary piles. Add them together, and you get a number a woman with no salary was never supposed to reach. Around $500,000. $500,000, built by a housewife, on no salary of her own, across 35 years of quiet, patient work. Here is the whole picture in one place. Roughly how the $500,000 broke down, every piece built from money she saved, never money she earned. See how the whole $500,000 came together over the decades. Slow and almost invisible for the first 15 years. Then, as compounding took hold, it began to climb in a way that surprised even her. Look at the shape of it. The shares, grown by decades of compounding, were the largest. The CPF, safe and steady, was second. Nothing here was exotic. It was patience, applied to ordinary tools. And it was still working. Her shares still pay dividends. Her CPF still pays out monthly. The $500,000 did not stop the day she did. It keeps providing, now for her children and grandchildren. On around $200,000 of shares, their estate now throws off something like $10,000 a year in dividends, all on its own, without anyone lifting a finger. Put that in perspective. $10,000 a year is a real second income, arriving forever, from money a housewife saved out of the grocery budget. That is what patience buys, in the end. May, the professional accountant with the salary and the promotions, did a quiet, hard sum in her head. Her mother, with no salary at all, had saved more than she had. It was a humbling afternoon. Now imagine the other version of this life. Suppose Ma had spent every windfall, eaten out often, upgraded things. The family would have looked a little richer for a while, and ended with almost nothing. But the money, it turned out, was the smallest part of what Madame Go left behind. The real inheritance was something you cannot deposit in any bank. As May sat with the notebook, she realized her mother had been teaching her, silently, her whole life. Not with lectures, but by living it, every single day, right in front of her. The lesson was simple, and May had absorbed it without noticing. Homemaking is not the absence of work. It is work. And the person who manages the household's money holds enormous quiet power. Think about it. The person who controls the household budget decides whether a family drifts or builds. Whether every dollar leaks away, or some is captured and grown. That is not a small job. It is the job. This is why the old idea that a homemaker is financially dependent gets it exactly backwards. In Ma's house, the earner depended on her. She turned his wage into a home, an education, and a fortune. For 35 years, Madame Go held that role and never dropped it. She was the chief financial officer of a company called her family. And by any honest measure, she was a brilliant one. At the wake, May said something that made the whole family go quiet. Her mother was not unemployed. She had run the most important business in all their lives. And she understood, finally, why that work deserved honor all along. Not pity. Not an apology. Respect, for a professional who did her job flawlessly for 35 years. Every good thing in that family, the paid-off flat, the children's education, the security, ran through her hands. She was not supported by the household. She was the one quietly holding it up. There is a lesson here for women especially. A person with no income of their own is not powerless, and need not stay financially invisible. Wealth held in your own name is wealth held in your own hands. But the deepest part of the inheritance was not the respect, and not the money. It was that May had been handed something she could actually use. And so had her children. Because habits are contagious, especially between a mother and a child who is watching. May had grown up seeing money treated with care and respect. It had shaped her own instincts, without her ever noticing. Her grandchildren felt it too. They remember a grandmother who let them keep the coins they found, who taught them to save half of every ang pao before spending the rest. Small lessons, dropped like seeds. This is the difference between two kinds of inheritance. This is not just a nice idea. Large windfalls are famously often gone within a few years, when they land with someone who never learned to keep them. Money without the habits simply leaks away. Give a child money, and you help them once. Teach a child how money works, and you help them for life, and their children after them. Madame Go did both. But the second was the real gift. Her brother Wei felt the pull the other way. His first instinct was to split the money and finally spend a little, a nicer car, a proper holiday. It is the most human reaction in the world. So May showed him the notebook. 35 years of tiny, careful entries, the savings column always filled in first. Wei went quiet, closed it gently, and said maybe they should keep her going instead. So the family made a decision together. They would not carve up the $500,000 and scatter it. They would keep most of it invested, exactly as she had, and let her work keep working. A living memorial. That night, May went home and did something she had put off for years. She sat her own two children down and began teaching them what her mother had taught her, this time out loud. The next morning she set up a small automatic transfer into savings. She started tracking the household spending again. Her mother's habits, jumping one more generation, exactly as they were meant to. That is how a legacy really works. The money is nice. But a habit, passed to a child who is paying attention, can outlive you by 100 years. That was Madame Go's true estate. May framed a single line from the notebook and hung it in her kitchen. Not a number. Just her mother's handwriting, steady and small, in a savings column that never once stayed empty. Before we end, an honest word. Because it would be wrong to tell this story as if anyone can simply copy it. Madame Go's path had conditions, and we should name them plainly. First and most important. Not every family can save on one income. Many households in Singapore need two incomes just to cover the essentials, and there is no shame in that. It is not a failing. It is arithmetic. If you are in a two-income home just keeping your head above water, this is not a story about what you failed to do. It is about a skill, one that helps even more when money is tight, not less. Madame Go also had advantages that many do not. Change any one of those, and the story changes. A serious illness, a job loss, a difficult marriage, and the same discipline might have built far less. She was skilled, but she was also fortunate. Both are true. And markets rose over her lifetime. Singapore grew from a young nation into a wealthy one, and her blue-chip shares rose with it. The future may be kinder or harsher. Nobody can promise you her returns. There is a harder truth too. We should not romanticize a lifetime of sacrifice. More when without many things so her family could have more. There was love, but it was also a real cost, paid by a real person. She skipped holidays she would have loved. She wore the same few outfits for years. She said no to herself 10,000 times. We can admire the result and still wish she had been gentler with herself. So the lesson is not, become a martyr who never spends. May's quiet regret was that her mother rarely treated herself, when she of all people had earned it. Save with discipline, yes. But also let yourself live. The balance to aim for is this. Take her discipline, her patience, her respect for money. But improve on the one thing she missed, and give yourself permission to enjoy some of the fruit along the way. But when you strip away the caveats, the heart of this story still stands, and it is worth carrying with you. It is really about seeing people clearly. If there is a homemaker in your life, a mother, a father, a partner, who runs the household and earns no salary, look again at what they actually do. It is work. Skilled, relentless, valuable work. And if you are that person, The one who keeps the household running without a pay slip, understand this clearly. You are not earning nothing. You hold real financial power, and you can build real wealth of your own. In fact, if you run a household on someone else's income, you can do exactly what Madam Go did. Here is her whole method, on one screen. Open something in your own name. Even a small savings account, or a First Singapore savings bond. Ask about topping up your own CPF. Independent wealth begins with a single account that is truly yours. And whoever earns the income, remember Mo's husband. He handed over his pay, trusted her completely, and topped up her retirement account, year after year. Building a partner's security is one of the kindest things money can do. And talk about the money, out loud, as a family. The quiet tragedy of many households is that only one person understands the finances. Mo understood everything. She just never got the credit while she could still hear it. A quick, important word. Everything here is for education, not financial advice. Madam Go is a character built from a real pattern, and every figure is rounded and illustrative. She is also the upper tail, not the average. Most careful savers will not reach $500,000 on one income. But most who follow her habits will end far more secure than they would have. And that alone is a wonderful thing. If you take one thing from this, let it be this. The person managing your household budget, salary or no salary, may be the most important financial professional you will ever know. Honor them. Learn from them. May keep the household notebook. Not the money, the notebook. It sits in her drawer now, and she still writes in it, continuing the accounts her mother kept for 35 years. Because the money will be spent, eventually, over the generations. But the habit of care, the respect for a dollar, the quiet discipline, those can go on forever, if someone is paying attention. So do not wait until a drawer is opened after a funeral to see the quiet financial genius in your own family. See them now. Ask them how they did it. Let them know that it was noticed. And if no one ever taught you these habits, that is not a verdict on you. It means you get to be the one who starts. Every legacy has a first link. Let it be you. The quiet ones are often the strongest. The person who never asks for credit, who simply shows up and does the work for decades, may be building something the loud ones never will. Thank you for sitting with this one. If Madam Go moved you, go and tell the quiet CFO in your family that you see what they do. Then start your own notebook, and let time do the rest. Thanks for watching. If this made building wealth in Singapore a little clearer, give it a like and subscribe to Lukebook so you don't miss the next episode. See you in the next one.